Picture a butcher shop, rows of beef, pork, chicken, lamb. Now imagine a wolf steak sitting next to them, or a lion chop. Something in your stomach turns before your brain even explains why. Here's the strange part. Nothing is technically stopping you. Wolves are made of meat, just like cows. Lions are made of meat, just like deer, and yet almost no culture on Earth eats them regularly. For nearly the entire span of human existence, our ancestors ate almost anything that moved: insects, rodents, snakes, even each other's rivals in desperate seasons. So why would eating a predator be the one line most humans never cross? The answer isn't squeamishness. It's older than culture. It's written into biology itself. Somewhere between the first fire and the first farm, humans made a decision so consistent across so many unconnected cultures that it stopped looking like a choice at all. It started looking like an instinct. To understand why, we have to go back. Past supermarkets, past farms, past agriculture, to a time when the difference between a good meal and a fatal one wasn't written on a label. It was learned the hard way and paid for in lives. Imagine a wolf finishing a kill. It doesn't just eat clean muscle. It eats organs, liver, kidneys, intestines still processing whatever the prey animal ate last. It eats bone marrow, blood, sometimes half-rotted meat from a carcass it didn't even kill. Now think about what that means. A wolf isn't just an animal. It's a walking archive of everything its prey ever consumed, filtered and concentrated through its own body. An herbivore's body is closer to the source. Plants in, muscle out. A predator's body has already done a second round of processing. Everything the wolf's prey survived, the wolf inherits. But that wasn't the strangest part of the problem. Picture an ancient hunter, thousands of years ago, cutting into a lion carcass. Inside, coiled in the muscle tissue, are microscopic parasites invisible to the naked eye. The kind that cause trichinosis, a disease that can leave a person feverish, weak, sometimes paralyzed for weeks. Here's why this matters more for predators than for prey. A parasite that infects a plant eater usually stops there, dead end. But a parasite living inside a predator has already survived one host, then jumped into the animal that ate it. Every trip up the food chain is another chance for something dangerous to hitch a ride. Early humans didn't need microscopes to learn this lesson. They needed funerals. A hunter who ate predator meat and fell ill weeks later couldn't have connected cause and effect through science. But a tribe could still notice a pattern. The families who avoided a certain kind of meat seemed to bury fewer of their own. That's how disgust may have been born, long before anyone understood biology. Not as an abstract rule, but as a felt sense. A tightening in the stomach passed down through repeated experience until eventually no explanation was needed at all. The feeling arrived first, the reason came later, if it came at all. Populations that leaned into that feeling got sick less often. Over generations, disgust became a survival shortcut, a gut feeling that didn't need to explain itself. But sickness wasn't the only danger hiding in a predator's body. Imagine a small fish absorbing tiny amounts of mercury from its environment. Now imagine a bigger fish eating hundreds of those small fish over its lifetime. Then imagine a shark eating hundreds of those bigger fish. The mercury doesn't disappear. It stacks. This process, scientists call it bioaccumulation, is one of the quiet rules of nature. Toxins that are barely measurable in a plant or a small animal become concentrated the further up the chain you go. A predator isn't just eating one animal, it's eating the accumulated exposure of everything that animal ever ate. That means the top of the food chain isn't the safest place to eat from. It's often the most contaminated. And this rule doesn't just apply to modern pollution. Long before industry, long before mercury in rivers, land predators were already concentrating heavy metals, plant toxins, and environmental compounds absorbed by everything beneath them. So even in a world untouched by human pollution, predator meat carried an invisible tax that herbivore meat didn't. Think of it like a debt passed up a chain of hands. Each animal pays a little into it, and the final holder, the predator at the top, inherits the whole balance. No single bite killed anyone outright. But eat that way for years, generation after generation, and the accumulated cost becomes impossible to ignore. Here's something hunters across history have reported independently on different continents without ever comparing notes. Predator meat often tastes different, sharper, muskier, sometimes described as sour or gamey in an unpleasant way. There's a biological reason. Diet shapes the chemical compounds stored inside muscle tissue and fat. A grass-fed deer stores plant-based fats. A wolf stores fats built from meat, blood, and whatever chemical defenses its prey carried in its own tissue. Add to that something simpler: stress hormones. A predator that dies fighting, cornered, adrenaline surging, releases chemicals into its own muscle that change flavor and texture. Prey animals in a herd, grazing calmly, generally don't carry that same hormonal signature. So even when predator meat was technically edible, it often wasn't pleasant. And a species that survives by learning from experience remembers unpleasant far longer than it remembers convenient. Picture two hunters returning to camp. One carries venison, tender, familiar, met with smiles. The other carries wolf meat, tough and strong-smelling, met with hesitation. Repeat that scene for 10,000 years, and you don't just get a preference. You get a tradition so old it forgets it was ever a decision. But taste and safety weren't the final piece of the puzzle. Picture a harsh winter, tens of thousands of years ago. Prey is scarce. A hunting party corners something bigger, more dangerous. A bear, perhaps, or a big cat competing for the same territory. Archaeological evidence tells us this did happen. Cut marks have been found on the bones of cave bears and wolves at prehistoric sites, suggesting that ancient humans occasionally did eat predators. Not as a preference, but as a last resort. This matters because it proves something important. Predator meat was never truly forbidden. It was avoided by choice, shaped by risk, not by biological impossibility. In desperation, humans crossed the line. In abundance, they didn't. That single pattern, repeated across continents and thousands of years, looks less like superstition and more like an ancient risk calculation, passed down so consistently it eventually felt like instinct. Consider what that means for the hunter in that harsh winter. Choosing to eat a bear wasn't reckless. It was a calculated trade, accepting a known immediate danger of starvation over an unknown, delayed danger of parasites or toxins. When the scale tipped far enough, even an ancient human's caution gave way to hunger. The rule wasn't never. It was not unless you have to. But here's where the story takes its final turn. Here's the twist most people never expect. Predator meat is not actually forbidden. Not biologically, not chemically. In the right conditions, properly cooked, sourced from healthy, parasite-free animals, some predator meat has been eaten by humans throughout history and even today, in certain cultures and situations. The barrier was never impossibility. It was risk versus reward. Prey animals offered a reliable, lower-risk source of calories. Predators offered danger during the hunt, elevated disease risk, chemical buildup, and often a worse-tasting result. Over tens of thousands of years, that math shaped something deeper than a habit. It shaped a feeling. The quiet discomfort you felt looking at that wolf steak earlier isn't random. It's an old survival calculation your body still remembers, even though your mind has forgotten why. So picture that butcher shop one more time. Rows of familiar meat on one side, a single, strange cut on the other. Nothing is stopping you from eating it. No law of biology forbids it, and yet something older than logic still pulls your hand toward the meat your ancestors chose 10,000 times before you were born. A decision made not by you, but by every human who survived long enough to pass that instinct down. The line was never drawn by rules. It was drawn by generations of quiet, invisible risk, and somehow, without a single word, you already knew where it was.